I read another chapter of Peak by K. Anders Ericsson yesterday, his book about deliberate practice and the mental representations that we develop as we go through deliberate practice. And one part of it, he was talking about the old, I forget the researcher's name, Chase studies, I believe, Simon and Chase maybe, chess studies that a lot of his research kind of built on. And so the original studies kind of looked at, one, how long does it take to become a chess master, and what does that really mean, and how can you differentiate, a master chess player versus, just another very good chess player. And so that's where the idea of chunking kind of came from. So, when a master chess player looked at a board that had realistic chess pieces or pieces, kind of out of a real game, the master chess players are able to remember or recall the position of the pieces much better than pretty good players or average players. Whereas if the pieces are just randomly set on the board and has nothing to do with an area of the game, or a situation within a realistic game, the master chess players are no better than average or poor chess players at remembering or recalling the position of the chess pieces. So essentially, what it shows is the master chess players are able to chunk that information, and that chunking of the information is within the context of a game, not just the ability to memorize, visually different positions or different, pieces on different squares. It has to be, context specific. And so as I was reading this, I immediately thought of the way that we teach plays to children or offenses. We typically teach 5-on-0, and then when we play and the players can't remember what to do, coaches are upset because they don't think the players are paying attention or whatever the case may be. And so to me, I try not to do any 5-on-0 work. Usually I will walk through a play one time, 5-on-0, just so they can see what we're getting towards, and then we're going to walk through it 5-on-5 to show how it actually looks. Because to me, 5-on-5 is such a different context than 5-on-0. And, this chapter from Ericsson's book, to me, reflected that there's that it's context specific. How we memorize and how we chunk the information is context specific. And again, 5-on-0 is a very different context than 5 versus 5. So again, I'm not a huge set play or continuity offense type coach anyway. So I don't spend a lot of time on this type of stuff for that reason. But when I do teach plays, I want to use 5-on-5 to walk through it, because the defense changes the context in terms of our memory. And so if we're trying to get children or players to memorize a play and then execute it against defense ultimately in a game situation, we need to teach it within that same context, which is going to have the defensive players there. So I remember years ago I used to work this summer camp, and there's a camp offense, and we'd spend the whole first day walking through it 5-on-0. And then the next day when we put defensive players there, the players would have no idea what to do. And every year coaches would go crazy. These players, they just can't remember anything. They can't execute the play correctly. And it's debatable whether that's what we should have been focusing on or not, but that's not the point. The point is that when we taught at 5-on-0, there wasn't the context there. And so then when the defensive players are put into the environment has changed. And as adults, we see that as a very small change. We have the mental representations, within our memory, that we know where we're going with this. We've drawn up the play on our blackboard. We've watched it on video of another team running it. So we know exactly what we're getting towards. But the players may not. And if the players haven't been exposed to that 5 versus 0, then they're not receiving the same information within the instruction, within the practice, that they're going to be perceiving when they ultimately play. And so rather than teaching at 5-on-0, we should teach at 5-on-5. And now it may take longer to go through a play 5-on-5 than it does to go through 5-on-0, because we're probably going to make more mistakes. but that's an opportunity to correct those mistakes in practice as opposed to waiting till the games to go 5-on-5, and now we're making mistakes 5-on-5, and we're in a game, so we can't correct them right away, or we have to call timeout and yell at a player because he's doing the wrong thing, or draw it up on a blackboard or a whiteboard in a 30-second timeout and hope that they can take what they see on a whiteboard and then do it in a game. So again, how we present the information needs to be context specific for it to create the correct mental representations in our memory. And so if we're teaching a play, maybe walk through it one time, 5-on-0, just so that we can walk through the 5-on-5 a little bit quicker. So it facilitates understanding where the movements are going to be and where players should be positioned and so forth. But then get to 5-on-5, immediately. Even if we're just going to walk through it several times 5-on-5 to get them the idea of the pattern or the options within a play or whatever we're trying to get them to understand within the structure of this offense. But do it 5-on-5 because that's the context they're going to have to use it in a game. And if we spend a lot of time just 5-on-0, that essentially becomes wasted practice because it's not creating the same mental representations in the brain as a 5-on-5 practice. And so the environment is completely different, and our perceptions of the information that we're seeing is completely different. In a 5-on-0 situation, we're basically running to spots, whereas 5-on-5, we're running to set an actual screen on an actual defensive player. And while that seems like a very small distinction to an adult brain, to a child who's learning the game, or a beginner who's learning the game, or even an experienced player who's learning a play for the first time, that distinction is very big. It's large. The difference in the context is the same thing as the chess player looking at a bunch of pieces on a board. Without the context, they're still the same pieces. It's still the same size board. Everything's essentially the same, but it's outside the context of the game. Whereas when they look at it within the context, now the masters are so much better because of that context, because they're able to chunk that information, because they see it differently than a novice player. And so same thing, 5-on-0 versus 5-on-5, the players are in similar positions, the court's the same size, but those defensive players change everything. And how we remember that information, how we chunk that information, the context that gives us and enables and improves our memory, all of those things work together to help us remember a play when we've seen it 5-on-5 and we've walked through it 5-on-5 and we've practiced it 5-on-5 compared to running through it in just a 5-on-0 situation.